drawn and redrawn, the making of India's internal boundaries.
Hi, and welcome back to India's State Stories, a project that explores the evolution of India's political and administrative boundaries. This project is supported by the Center for Legislative Education and Research, Flame University, Pune.
Integration of princely states was a complex process which resulted in the new states that were divided into 4 administrative categories, parts A, B, C, and D. This series focuses on the 3 main categories that are part A, B, and C. In the first part, we will be exploring the integration of princely states that formed the part A states. In other words, they were absorbed and merged into their respective British provinces. These range from major states like Baroda, Kolhapur to smaller and little known regions like Sandur and patchwork of states in modern day Gujarat and Orissa. The merger agreements for most of the states were modelled after Orissa and Chhattisgarh state mergers, and their administration was transferred to provincial governments. Now let's look at the stories of each of these in more detail in the following episodes. Listen to the first 3 episodes of Season 2 to understand a deeper context. These episodes give an overview of the entire process of integration, along with an introduction to the legal instruments and some key personalities which made it possible. More details are in the show notes below, and let's dive in.
We often talk about huge historical moments, like the partition of India in these really broad terms, big events, big dates. But sometimes the real story, the human story, is tucked away in the smaller details, the individual choices, the places you might not even have heard of. And that's what we're doing today. We're diving into 3 fascinating, often overlooked Muslim princely states in East Punjab: Loharu, Dujana, and Pataudi. These weren't just dots on a map. They were places where real people faced impossible decisions during one of history's most chaotic times. So using a historical article as our guide, our mission here is to unpack their origins, their connections, and how each took a very different path into the new India.
And that's exactly why looking at these smaller states is so valuable. It's not just trivia. Their stories really help us understand the messy, complex reality of how India came together, how all those hundreds of princely states actually became part of the nation. It wasn't one size fits all. The outcomes for the rulers, for the people living there, often depended heavily on the choices made right then, under immense pressure. It shows you the complexity of it all.
Okay, let's unpack that, starting with their origins, because they actually share a surprising beginning, don't they? All 3, Loharu, Dujana, Pataudi, small Muslim states, all situated there in East Punjab.
That's right. And what's really striking is they weren't ancient kingdoms passed down through generations like many others. No, they were actually established much later, created by Lord Lake, the British commander. Essentially, they were rewards, land grants given to the ruling families because they'd provided crucial help during military campaigns against powerful groups like the Marathas, Scindia, and Holkar specifically. This was back in the early 19th century.
So they started as rewards for military service.
Exactly. Initially, they were just jagirs. Think of it like a land grant tied to service, often military service, not quite independent states yet. But over time, the British administration and the government of India eventually recognized them as states, independent states. This gave them a sort of unique status within the Punjab region, which becomes really important later on.
Founded on military service and British patronage. That feels like... Well, how might that specific origin have made them potentially more vulnerable, or perhaps even shape their allegiances differently as the British were preparing to leave?
That's a great question. It likely did make them feel different, perhaps more directly tied to the British system that was now disappearing. Unlike states with centuries of history and tradition behind them, their legitimacy was, in a way, more recent, more connected to British power.
Right.
So when that power withdrew, their position might have felt, well, less secure, maybe more transactional in the eyes of some. It definitely put them in a unique spot when partition happened. They had to figure out their place very quickly.
That makes sense. Okay, let's look at the first one then. Loharu. Not huge, about 226 square miles, population around 28,000 people. And geographically, it had some really interesting connections.
Yes, it did. Loharu had deep ties with Rajasthan going back centuries, actually, about 3.5 centuries. And right before the merger, it had a particularly close relationship with Bikaner, a major Rajasthani state.
And being right next to Rajasthan, it even seemed like it might be easier to administer from Jinchunu nearby.
Logically, perhaps. But the reality of partition intervened quite dramatically. During all the communal violence that erupted, the Nawab of Loharu found himself in a well, an impossible position, he was essentially obliged to leave his state, forced out really by the sheer chaos and danger. It wasn't a free choice.
Obliged to leave. Wow, so what happened then?
Well, there were discussions with VP Menon, the key official handling state integrations for the new Indian government, and ultimately the Nawab agreed to merge Loharu not with Rajasthan, despite the ties, but with East Punjab. He signed the agreement on February 17, 1948.
So, despite centuries of links to Rajasthan, the immediate violence forced his hand, forcing him out and leading to merger with East Punjab. Today, it's part of Hisar district. It really shows how the immediate crisis just completely overrode those deeper historical or geographical affinities, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a stark example. History, geography, culture, all pushed aside by the immediate existential threat of communal violence. The Nawab's departure, the merger with East Punjab, it highlights the brutal realities on the ground. The lines on the map were being redrawn by force and fear, not just by logic or history. It underscores the human cost.
Okay, let's move to the second state, Dujana. Even smaller, 100 square miles, population under 30,000.
Right, and Dujana's founding adds another little twist. It was established by an Afghan, Abd Samad Khan. He started as a small jagirdar, but under the Mughal emperor in Delhi before the British connection solidified things. So layers of history there too. And for Dujana, the condition of their statehood was very, very clear from the British perspective. Absolute loyalty to the British government and providing military service when asked. That was the deal, underscoring those military origins we talked about.
And they lived up to it. We have examples like Nawab Muhammad Khurshid Ali Khan. He ruled from 1908 to 1925. During World War I, he put everything the state had at the government's disposal. Troops, resources, everything.
Yes, and he received various honors for that war service. It shows that relationship in action. Dujana had its rank too, 19th in precedence among Punjab states.
Yeah.
So recognized, but lower down the list.
But then comes partition, and the Nawab of Dujana makes a very different choice compared to Loharu's ruler. Amidst all the violence, he decided to leave for Pakistan, and he took whatever movable property he could manage with him. A clear decision to go.
Yes, a decisive move. And with the Nawab gone, the government of India didn't really have another option. They merged Dujana state into East Punjab. But here's the interesting postscript. The Nawab apparently regretted his decision later. Yes, he actually applied to the Indian government for a privy purse that payment former rulers received. But the request was denied. The government's stance was clear. He had chosen to leave, he was no longer an Indian subject, so no privy purse.
So his choice to flee had permanent consequences. That denial of the privy purse. What does that tell us about how the new Indian nation viewed loyalty and citizenship, especially for these former rulers?
It tells us a lot, actually. It's a very clear signal. The denial wasn't just about money, it was about principle. If you chose Pakistan, you gave up your rights and privileges in India. Simple as that. It established that citizenship, allegiance to the new India, was paramount. No switching back and forth, especially when it came to entitlements like the privy purse. His choice was seen as final.
A stark contrast. Okay, on to our third state, Pataudi. The smallest of the three, just about 53 square miles, maybe 20,000 people.
Pataudi's ruling family also had Afghan origins, tracing back to Sheikh Pir Met, who came during Emperor Akbar's time. So another link to that broader historical context. And like the others, a descendant, Faiz Talab, got the Pataudi territory, the Ilaqua, as a perpetual jagir from Lord Lake in 1806. Again, that same origin pattern.
Same, right.
And its rank was 17th in precedence in Punjab, slightly higher than Dujana.
Now, Pataudi has this really unique, almost personal detail. The Nawab at the time of partition wasn't just a ruler. He was a famous cricketer.
Yes, a very well-known sportsman. It adds such a human dimension, doesn't it? Thinking about this figure known for sport navigating such intense political turmoil.
It really does. And it seems his character, maybe shaped by sportsmanship, played a role.
It certainly seems that way. He was widely respected, highly regarded, for actively promoting tolerance during that awful communal frenzy. At a time of intense hatred and violence, he was out there preaching peace, practicing tolerance within his own state. Quite remarkable, really. He stood out.
And unlike the others, his decision regarding the merger was different again.
Completely different. He didn't flee, he wasn't forced out. He voluntarily offered to merge Pataudi with East Punjab. He signed the merger agreement on March 18th, 1948. A proactive choice based on his values, it seems.
Wow, the contrast is incredible.
Isn't it? You have the Nawab of Dujana fleeing, losing privileges, and then you have the Nawab Pataudi promoting peace, voluntarily joining India, securing a completely different legacy. It just vividly shows how, Even in the exact same chaotic circumstances, individual leadership, personal character, and values could lead to totally different outcomes. It wasn't just fate. Choices mattered immensely.
Pulling these three threads together, Loharu, Dujana, Pataudi. Shared origins as small Muslim British-created states in East Punjab, but their paths through partition and into India, wildly different.
Exactly. All faced the same storm communal violence, the pressure to choose allegiance. But how they weathered it varied enormously. You've got Loharu's Nawab basically forced out, Dujana's Nawab choosing flight and facing the consequences, and Pataudi's Nawab making a principled, voluntary choice for integration and tolerance. It's a whole spectrum of responses.
Right, that spectrum.
And connecting that to the bigger picture, these stories really show that the integration of the princely states wasn't some neat, tidy administrative process. It was messy. It involved negotiation, coercion sometimes, individual personalities, moments of crisis, principled stands, a real mosaic. Each story adds a vital piece to understanding how modern India was actually formed on the ground.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much of the character of these individual rulers, faced with unimaginable pressure, truly shaped the outcome, and how stories like these complicate any simple narrative we might have about partition. So there you have it. Loharu, Dujana, Pataudi. Small states, perhaps, but the stories offer huge insights into the human side of massive historical change.
Absolutely. Understanding these specific experiences helps us appreciate the sheer complexity, the intricate weave of something as monumental as partition. You see the individual threads that make up the larger pattern.
And leaves us with a thought, maybe for you to consider. How many other pivotal moments in history, the ones we read about in headlines, are actually built on countless decisions like these? Decisions made by people facing their own hopes and fears, whose names we might never know. What other deep dives into seemingly small corners of history could teach us profound lessons about how our world came to be? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into East Punjab's fascinating lost states.